far reaches of the Milky Way galaxy, it's Retro Nerd Girl with a film review for you. Today, I'll be reviewing the movie Sword and the Sorcerer, released in 1982. The synopsis is, Titus Cromwell, King of Aragon, finds a sorcerer by the name of Zusha of Delos to win a war for him against the country of Aden. But years later, a stranger arrives to change the balance of power with his three-bladed sword. The story. The story's not based on anything that I could find on any of my research, but at the time I know that sword and sorcery as a genre was gaining some traction. In 1981, there were a slew of fantasy sword and sorcerer movies. The film industry doubled down in 1982 with so many releases that came out of this genre of films, of mainly low-budget ones. Of all of them, Conan the Barbarian, released in 1982, had a larger budget and takes credit for inspiring many movies in this genre. However, it was actually the popularity of the books written by Robert E. Howard and comic books featuring the character in the 1970s that inspired the trend. But also, it would be remiss of me not to mention the bodybuilding craze of the 1980s that was exploding at this time as the outfits were getting skimpier and the hairstyles were getting bigger and bigger. Now, this film was written by Tom Karnowski, John V. Stuckmeyer, and the director Albert Pune. This was Albert's directorial debut, and he went on to do some pretty notorious films like Cyborg, Captain America, and a few kickboxing sequels, and all of the Nemesis movies. He's actually a legend in the world of low-budget action B-movies. He's definitely somebody that if you like B-movies, you like action movies, most likely you've seen one of his movies. The story here is made in the old Hollywood style of action-adventure films with a battle for the throne and a dynamic entrance of a swashbuckling action hero ready to save the day. Most of these movies have similar themes, but I think this one in particular has a hint of Robin Hood baked into the story. Now, the pacing. At 1 hour and 39 minutes, it's as I like it, short and sweet. It actually could have been a little longer, and I wouldn't have minded at all. Now, the challenge. The challenge in the film is the evil King Titus Cromwell of Aragon, who awakens the powerful sorcerer Zusha to help him win the war against the kingdom of Aden, ruled by the kind King Richard. Aragon was actually a real medieval kingdom in Spain, and Aden, also known as Aden, was also an actual place in medieval times that is currently called Yemen, which is about the time of many of the sword and sorcery movies. Aden was a very popular city attracting people from Egypt, India, East Africa, and China for trading. It would be very attractive to a conqueror like Cromwell to rule, and at one point Portugal and the United Kingdom occupied it independently. Cromwell tells Zusha that his reward for helping him is not being killed. It's a little weak, but you get the sense that Zusha is working on his own plan, and he was only keeping his promise to buy himself a little time until he was stronger. However, Cromwell broke his word as soon as Zusha took care of weakening King Richard's army. Afraid of the power of the sorcerer, Cromwell attempted to kill him, but Zusha escaped. Living in fear for 11 years, Cromwell is beside himself with distrust of everyone and bitterness. He acts a lot like a spoiled brat, seething with constant scowl. Even though he gets everything he wants, he's not truly ever satisfied. He's so obsessed with finding Zusha to the point that he considers the rebellion of the people of Aden the work of the sorcerer to get his revenge. But he's not entirely wrong, because Zusha does have his hands in the mix, but only in disguise as the king's right-hand man, MacLeod. In the disguise of MacLeod, he is so sneaky, full of lies, and just worthy of distrust. He always seems to have a look on his face that screams, something is wrong, something is afoot, okay? So he does have that suspicious suspicious look about him. And I loved his deception. It's a little bit like the twirling mustache villain, but knowing that there was a character like this, and knowing that there was also like a flat out evil guy like Cromwell, was kind of a nice play in the story. And I loved his deception. I have to say that when I first saw the story, I just did not know that he was secretly Zusha in disguise. I mean, they look nothing alike. If anything, I thought he was maybe one of Zusha's henchmen. Zusha, in his original form, is a 7-foot beastly-looking character with a fierce temperament. He's very scary, and he shows his power by catching the heart of a victim in his hands. It's gory, and you understand what's happening quickly. When he's out to get you, you're done for. He only lacks a little more about who he is and how he came to be. So that is the biggest weakness of his character. He's really souped up to be this super bad guy, but we just don't know anything about him. In the very beginning, as I mentioned before, he seems to have desires of his own, to have his own kingdom. But it may have been that they couldn't really have expanded the story due to budget restrictions. Just to give you an example, Conan had $20 million to play with in their budget, and this movie only had $4 million. So for what they had to work with, I say they did very well. I thought Zusha was a bit naive for not having his own insurance when dealing with Cromwell. He's so powerful, but he doesn't expect that a mere mortal would dare to even contest him. But he underestimated Cromwell. You know, Cromwell is the kind of character who dares. Actually, I enjoyed these bad guys so much. The villains are not the smartest, but they are a lot of fun for our story. Now, the empathy. The film sets up a nice backstory for our protagonist, Talon. Talon is the surviving son of King Richard of Aden, who watched his entire family get murdered by Titus and his men. All he has left is his 3-bladed sword his father gave him, with the promise that he would one day avenge him. 11 years after Cromwell's victory over Aden, Talon returns as a mysterious hero with his rogues. He's making a pit stop on his way to save King Lambosha at Maladan in order to pay a debt. So right away, he's definitely out to avenge his father, as he promised, but he also makes a promise to another king to help them out. So he's out for revenge, but he's also got a heart. He arrives just as the rebellion is about to strike Cromwell, led by Micah and his sister Alana, the surviving children of King Richard's advisor and the closest heirs to the throne. Unfortunately, MacLeod pretended to be an ally in order to prove to Cromwell that he could be trusted, and Micah was captured. Alana was going to be captured as well, but Talon managed to save her. She's noticing that he's from out of town and he's a traveling warrior, and she gets him to agree to rescue her brother in exchange for a night with her. Yep, that's the bargain. It's actually interesting because there is palpable attraction between the two of them, and maybe things would have even been more blunter than that in the actual time period. The protagonist seems to be a magnet for sexual attraction. Before we consider him a scoundrel for being interested in only sex, he's actually going to risk his life to do this, and the movie reminds you of that. Talon is very likable in spite of his persona of comedic indifference. He always seems to have a smirky grin on his face until he's in real trouble or he's ready to battle. He reminds me a lot of Han Solo with his charm. However, in action, Talon is magnificent. He fights like a beast in his final battle scenes, and it's a shame we only have this movie to document his adventures. I do want to talk a little bit about Alana, the classic damsel in distress. Her role is a little old-fashioned, but she's a feisty girl with a signature move of kneeing, violating men in the nether regions. It doesn't always work, but it shows that she was brave enough to risk fighting back whenever she thought she could. And I really like that about the character. Now, the technical aspects. There's a lot you could get away with in the fantasy genre that you can't get away with other genres. And you can really go big and not have to worry about verisimilitude. The title promises the audience a sword, and boy, did we ever get a sword with 3 blades. 2 of the blades eject at high velocity to knock back their targets into oblivion. Built into the sword is yet a smaller blade in the handle, but that's not all. The sword appears in the beginning and in the end, but is not really a part of the story until then. I really wish that there was a backstory about the sword, and perhaps a little bit more hoop-de-doo about it, like Cromwell wanting to have this legendary sword for himself. It would have made for a longer film, but maybe a little bit more in-depth film. Even with the sword, it's not enough to kill Cromwell, but Talon also has a metal gauntlet that has a hidden blade. Incredible! This man came to win a fight, and that is for sure. And I wouldn't be surprised if he had more hidden blades on him, somewhere on him. I just enjoyed the creative fight scenes that may baffle reality, but brought tons of excitement with twists and turns and amazing surprises. The transformation of MacLeod into Zusha was one of the most incredible that I had seen in 1982, besides, of course, the most epic transformation in An American Werewolf in London, and a few other movies as well. This was really awesome. I was only 12, and my mom had taken me to see this in the theater, and wow, it's so gooey and gross. I loved it. Another wowing scene was the very beginning, where Zusha's tomb had faces carved into the stone. But once the rites to his awakening began, the stone came alive, animated with bloody faces, writhing in agony. It was a pretty cool effect for the time. Not bad at all. Not bad at all. Zusha's creature design was very, very interesting, featuring many bumps and humps that looks like charred skin with open sores. It looks like he's reptilian of some sort because of his eyes. I thought it was very creative that either he had once was human and had done so many horrible things that it manifested itself physically, or he's just born of this kind of creature. Again, a backstory would have been great for this because there was so much detail in his character that we didn't get the story behind it. The performances. Again, due to the budget, many television actors were selected for the film, but for sure the acting was superb. American film, television, and theater actor Lee Horsley, known for starring roles in the television series Nero Wolfe in 1981, and Matt Houston from 1982 to 1985, played Talon, channeling the fabulous action hero actors like Douglas Fairbanks in The Thief of Baghdad in 1924 and Errol Flynn of Robin Hood in 1938. He definitely had some swashbuckling swagger, doing his best to show a range in his performance. I thought he was fantastic. Kathleen Beller was very popular on television, showing up in several shows, including Dynasty in 1982. However, she had a feature film career appearing in movies like The Betsy in 1978. She doesn't have a lot to do here, but she does her best with it. Richard Lynch played Cromwell and won a Saturn Award for Best Supporting Actor for his performance, and it's well deserved. Unfortunately, Lynch was typecast as a villain for most of his acting career because of his burn scars from a 1967 accident. He seemed to embrace his career with vigor and always brought so much energy to his performances. He is the main part of the reason that this film works for me. Richard Mall is best known for Night Court from 1984 to 1992, but he currently has 180 acting credits in TV, movies, and voice acting. And indeed, his physical size was possibly part of the casting, but because he got very sick due to the makeup that was used for Zusha, he had to be body doubled, and Richard's voice was matched to the performance. The enjoyment! The film grossed about $39 million at the box office, and it was the most profitable independent film of 1982. The critics, of course, hated it, but audiences that saw it enjoyed it to the point that a small run of plastic three-bladed swords were produced for the public for a while. It was originally conceived as the first in a series of several films. In fact, at the end of the film it says, "Tales of an Ancient Empire was coming soon." 25 years later, Albert Pyun said that the sequel was on the way in 2007. Then finally, in 2012, Tales of an Ancient Empire was released straight to video. It was a 30-year wait, and the story had veered off into vampires? And the next generation of characters. It was very interesting. But back to this movie, Sword and the Sorcerer is a film that is known among B-movie lovers and still mostly unknown. However, it's growing in popularity as an 80s classic sword and sorcery film. There are some horror elements that are icky, but it marries well with the campy aesthetics that makes it so much fun to watch. There's a lot of good old school homage throughout in the acting and the triumphant music that was used. It's a lovely 80s throwback and one of my very favorite guilty pleasures. My rating is a 7.7. Well, that sums up my review. I hope you liked it, and if you did, I've got over 100 of these, so go on ahead and browse the channel to see more reviews from me like this. Subscribe if you haven't done so already, and hit the bell icon to be the very first to get my next video. I want to take this moment to recognize my amazing, wonderful, incredibly awesome Patreon supporters who are responsible for helping me to produce this video. Many thanks to these incredible movie lovers for their support, and you too can be on this list by heading over to Patreon and getting a bit of behind-the-scenes stuff from me that you don't get on YouTube. This is Retro Nerd Girl signing off. Take care, movie lovers, and off to my next review!